One of the big gifts of the quantum worldview is to straighten out the confusion that exists in terms of what is enlightenment. In absence of any word, this word enlightenment has been used to umpteenth times in the spiritual literature of recent times. Everyone who has awareness, who is aware of spiritual traditions, who is aware of recent advances that are happening in science, wants to be enlightened. And that is to be admired. It is not to be slighted. There is really such a thing as enlightenment. There is no doubt about it, because many people are having it in one form or another, but there is debate what it consists of, naturally, because it is such a state of enormous importance in both spiritual literature and for scientific investigation. Science, of course, has a difficult dichotomy to resolve. On one hand, materialist science holds that there is no such thing as consciousness as we experience it. Consciousness is some kind of robotic existence with experience. It consists of just barely the um, subjective qualia of experiences. That's all we can have. So that's one picture. The other picture, the spiritual tradition, they also have many divisions. Some pictures have enlightenment as a sudden process, sudden enlightenment. This is the picture that dominates the Zen tradition. The tradition in another Zen sect, in fact, in Japan itself, Soto Zen, which on the other hand says that no enlightenment will be gradual and slow process. Can they both be right? Yes, in a way of looking, how, depending on how you define things, they both can be right. So there is that debate. There's also the debate of what it exactly consists of, because in the ultimate reckoning, here is where things get interesting. Because the spiritual traditions are saying consciousness is the ground of being, which quantum physics completely agrees, quantum measurement theory specifically. Consciousness is the ground of being, and all objects, both matter and non-matter, consist of possibilities of consciousness to choose from. And the olden picture, the spiritual picture, did not have a good model for how this consciousness manifests in the world, become subject, acquires the subject-object distinction. This problem has now been solved, which also solves the quantum measurement theory problem. From both sides, the solution is highly satisfactory. On one hand, quantum physics has many, many paradoxes, which all can be resolved with this particular assumption of metaphysical assumption. On the other hand, in the spiritual tradition, there is the problem of how the one became many, how the split happens, how one can ever be distinguished between one part that experiences the other part. We now have solved the problem with that concept of tangled hierarchical collapse, in which way the brain identifies with the consciousness identifies with the brain. Okay, so what is enlightenment then resolves down to a question of whether we are talking about the unconscious ground of being, or if we are talking about after manifestation. This is the question. This question is very hard to resolve. Why? So we'll spend a little bit of time with that. When the tangle hierarchy happens, tangle hierarchical measurement, quantum measurement happens, then we say that the consciousness identifies with the brain, and that is the observer's consciousness. But in the immediate sense, consciousness becomes a self-experience, which is a cosmic self. The self of immediate experience is a cosmic self, in the sense that it still has all the cosmic qualities, namely oneness with everything. So what happens when you experience this self? This experience which is not that esoteric because many people have it, as I said. It's called by various names in various traditions and countries, but no doubt that many people have had this experience that in Sanskrit called Savikalpa Samadhi. Samadhi is a word which comes from two words, sama and adhi, which means sort of equal status. The ego and quantum self are both on equal status. The subject and objects, another way of looking at it, I'm sorry, the ego does not exist yet, so forget that statement. Or subject and object are on equal footing. That's the meaning of samadhi. You have an experience of oneness with everything. That's spelling it out. I am one with everything. But notice that the distinction still exists. I am one with everything. So everything exists, I exist. I'm just seeing my oneness with everything. Okay? Very important to distinguish language. So what would be experience beyond it? Beyond it, there would be no experience because beyond it is the unconscious in which there is only oneness. There is no subject-object split. Okay? This has to be understood. So the debate. How can one say that one has experience of enlightenment, anything beyond the Savikalpa Samadhi? However, one point can easily be made. The point that can easily be made comes from the quantum idea of delayed choice experience. We know that sometimes what happens is that there is a station, homeostatic station, which initiates a process. But the process is not experienced, does not come to manifestation until later when the choice happens. This delayed choice can happen later to produce an event earlier. This concept is possible in quantum physics, has been verified experimentally. So there is no question that this delayed choice is a real phenomenon. So if you understand this, then you can easily see that in a certain sense, this samadhi without experience can be explained because suppose it's an effect of a delayed choice. I choose while I'm having the savikalpa experience, right? Subject-object split has happened, but that going backward in time also collapsed a state that can be called samadhi without any experience, without any subject-object split. Need vikalpa samadhi, that's the Sanskrit of it. Need, no, vikalpa. Vikalpa is separateness, samadhi. With samadhi without separateness. So it is possible as a delayed state that came about as a result of a delayed choice. But the experience of it is still dubious. Yes, I did experience it, but it's in the past. So what do I have to show for it? I should have a memory of it, right? And indeed, people who have it, they do claim that, yes, I remember I remember having something, but they cannot tell you what they have. This is very interesting. We should be dubious because they cannot tell us what they have, but nevertheless, it's significant. Everybody would say, yes, I remember there was something. I entered a state, but I cannot tell you anything about it. Unspeakable experience. So you can take two tracks of it. One is like the philosopher Wittgenstein, he says, thereof you cannot speak of, thereof one cannot speak of, one should remain silent. That's one way of thinking of it. If you cannot speak of an experience, better not talk about it. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it, okay, if such an effect did happen, if such a cause did happen, then what would be the after effect of it? The after effect of it would be delight, simply a wonderful kind of joy that we cannot have anything without this nirvikalpa samadhi. So this actually is reported. So much joy after the samadhis when people wake up from them, that the people who are around them, the disciples, they report that the joy is the kind which is one of a kind. This is called Turiyananda. Turiya, Turiya, is the name of this state of consciousness, nirvikalpa state, samadhi without separateness, Turiya, and Ananda, which means spiritual joy. Ananda of this particular state is very special Ananda. So it has given a special name, Turiyananda. So in that sense, the debate can be considered to be over. Yes, we have this kind of, whether you can call it experience or not, one philosopher called it imperience. I rather like the word imperience, internalized experience of sort, imperience. Let's assume that people can have this kind of imperience. And what is the result? Let's get a perspective of it. The perspective was given best by Buddha, Buddhism. Buddhism starts with the first noble truth: life is suffering. So what is the way to avoid suffering? There is an answer to suffering, and it is non-attachment. If you practice non-attachment, then sooner or later you would be non-attached to everything and quantum leap into a state of nirvana, when desires will cease, cessation of all desires to be attached. This is the Buddhist wisdom. 4 different truths, but eventually the final truth is that, yes, when attachment to is completely achieved, then they don't use the word quantum leap, but we use it. One quantum leaps to a state of cessation of desire, nirvana. Vana means desire in Sanskrit. Nir is negation. Nirvana, cessation of desire. So this is a wonderful depiction in a way, saying the same thing as Nirvikalpa Samadhi without getting into the ontological difficulties of description. It's just saying the practical stuff that happens. After I wake up from Nirvana, what I would find is my desires for staying in the world has gone away. So what do I do? This then is the question. And here again, that same problem arises. So what do people do? If such nirvana or cessation of desire or nirvikalpa samadhi, samadhi without separateness is possible, then what is so special about these people? What do they? This is the attainment, the final attainment is done. So now what do you do? How do you live? This is the question. The Buddhists neatly avoid it. They avoid it by telling a story, a fable, that Buddha was thinking that, okay, I have attained, but how do I teach it? There's nobody that will make sense of such an experience. How do I teach it? Why should I teach it? Maybe I should just quit. So the gods came to Buddha and said, if you don't teach, then we are stuck, because people must know about it. The world need to have a spiritual awakening. And so Buddha relented and stayed and taught all of his life. Now, it is interesting because the Hindus realize this, that, aha, this is people end up doing. Story or not, the fable may be made up, but the fact is that Buddha taught. He had cessation of desire, but he rekindled a little bit of something that enabled him to talk. Obviously, teaching would be very difficult without any desire associated with it. So he must have rekindled his desire of teaching, and he taught. Makes sense? So in effect, he is nirvana. He is into that nirvikalpa samadhi already, into achieve the final achievement. And yet he is coming back and also staying in the world. So Hindus skillfully give a name to this stage of existence. They call it Paramahansa, the stage of the Paramahansa. Hansa means a goose. And the goose is supposed to have a quality that they can drink the whey out of the milk and leave the water behind. So this is what a Paramahansa does. He lives in the world, but lives only for the essence, but does not delve into all the things that binds you to the world. They don't get into bondage anymore. They live like they're free people in the world. So why am I talking about all this? This is the traditional debate about enlightenment. This is the enlightenment that people loosely have sought before. But what we now must state that since we are scientizing the subject, scientizing spirituality, we are developing scientific spirituality. Is this idea of Nirvikalpa Samadhi scientific? We may debate about existence or not, but the fact remains that beyond experience, there is only metaphysics. There is no science because you cannot prove it directly. With all this discussion, we still must agree that it is still debatable if delayed choice does apply, if people are really having this experience which they cannot talk about it. It is still all debatable. A narrative which is very likely to be true, but not necessarily true because we cannot directly say that, yes, I have seen that experience, because as soon as I have said that, I'm claiming that that was not unconscious. There was consciousness, there was awareness. And that is not what we are talking about. We are talking about an experience without awareness. And that is a non sequitur in scientific language. It just cannot be. This is a statement without any meaning. So, what is scientific? Scientific is to say that the experience can happen only savikalpa experience, savikalpa samadhi. So why don't we, the scientific approach would be, why don't you leave the debate to esotericism, where it belongs, people who need that debate, but concentrate on the other hand, what is very achievable, which is the experience of savikalpa samadhi, samadhi with separateness. In other words, what we would say, the quantum self-experience. When the consciousness splits by tangle hierarchical measurement in the brain, it splits as a subject and object, and this subject has many numinous quality. And one of the numinous qualities is, of course, that oneness with everything. Expansion, no boundary. Expansion without any boundary. Consciousness seems to engulf everything. The stars, the grass, the trees, the sky, everything belongs to consciousness. Everything, I'm one with everything. It really is an amazing, amazing experience. So, if we say that the science can only talk about enlightenment in this way, then we can call it quantum enlightenment. What is actually taking place? Let's go over this once again. I have gone over this many times, but it's worth hearing again and again and thinking again and again, because it is very subtle, these things are. So what is then happening? Consciousness is collapsing, choice has been made, and we are experiencing quantum self, okay? But remember, let's go back to the origin of the self-reference of the self-referential sentence, I am a liar, from which the idea of tangle hierarchy came. So I am a liar. If I am a liar, then I'm telling the truth. If I'm telling the truth, I'm a liar. And indeed, if you get entered the sentence, you get caught in it. But do you really get caught in it? Everybody who has experiences of such getting caught in it also knows that you can also withdraw. Once you become aware that you got caught in it, you are unnecessarily reciting it beyond the point you are trying to make. And then immediately you stop and come back to reality, right? This is our experience. So tangle hierarchy with the quantum self must be a similar thing. The person is in temporary amnesia, Temporary amnesia meaning that identity is real. It's an appearance that yes, you have identified with the brain. That only a little bit of staying in that consciousness, one would realize that I can also jump out of the system and become one. That option is available. I can jump into reality anytime. This is only an appearance. That's awareness is not completely gone, is what I'm saying, in that state. But you have to go deeper. So there are two experiences here. Indeed, a search of the spiritual literature shows that people talk about Savikalpa Samadhi in the way that I am one with everything. People also talk about an experience called no self experience. Indeed, if we think about it and say that I don't really have to identify with the brain, that moment I achieve a no self. I don't exist anymore because all is merged into that consciousness beyond, oneness consciousness. We have become unconscious again. That thought, or that feeling will completely get rid of the separation state of separation. I immediately become no self state. I am that nothing. There is no self. This is also a statement of Buddhism. There is no self. On Atman. Atman does non Atman, negation of Atman, no Atman. So Atman and no Atman just flip sides of each other. Atman is looking at the objects. As soon as I stop looking at the objects, looking at myself, I don't exist. That experience. No me. Experience of no me. I do not exist. Beyond that, there is no other experience because beyond that, you are one. There is no experience, nothing. Nothing can be said about that. Cessation of desire, deeper experience. This is not about cessation of desire because that doesn't happen. Just I am no self. That is the last experience you can say. There is no self or not one. Okay? So in this way, it becomes very clear that the state of quantum self is extremely tenuous. It is a real state, and one can have this avikalpa experience, and it is a state of exaltation because one is concentrating on the objects and one's oneness with the objects. It is very joy-producing, and therefore you get into it, and you don't want to look beyond. At least from a person who had this experience, I can say that there is just no desire of looking because you are just so surprised and so amused and so joyful in the process of experiencing your oneness with everything that there is just no thought of going beyond it or going beyond that what lies beyond this. There's just no such desire existed in me. No such inclination existed in me. So naturally, I did not even look into it, whether it is possible to get out of this state altogether. But people have, and they have reported no self-experience. That is equally true. So therefore, what can we say? We say science begins with this discussion between self-experience, oneness with everything, and no self-experience, because there is a state of negation of this. Okay, I'm not looking at the objects and oneness of me with the objects anymore. I'm just looking at myself. Do I exist? And then I must have to say that no, I do not exist. The final word is that quantum self is an illusion. And that we already have agreed. It's an illusory separateness. The separateness that tangle hierarchy produces is an illusory separateness. It's still scientific. The statement of no self is still completely scientific. This I want to insist, and you should see that. The statement is completely scientific, that I am no self, because quantum the science itself is saying that tangle hierarchy produces an illusory separateness between subject and object. The subject can easily realize, okay, this separateness is an illusion. That realization is expressed by saying, I am no self. This self that I'm seeing is not real. It's an illusion. Okay, that's the no self experience. So in this way, we can understand a state that we can call quantum enlightenment. The fully scientific enlightenment is a state of quantum enlightenment. Okay? There are two experiences within it. One is the Sabikalpa experience of samadhi, oneness with everything, and the other is that I do not exist. The self-experience is illusory after all. Both verifies the quantum ontology, quantum epistemology that is created with the concept of tangled hierarchy. So then what should we do then? How should we proceed from this? What should be the object of spirituality? Should spirituality still hang around with the idea of esoteric metaphysics? Esoteric metaphysics has another big disadvantage. If we take the esoteric tradition seriously, then they say that the ego is actually meaningless. Ego is not only that, they say ego is evil because it's keeping you in ignorance and um, you are eating the sweet fruit of samsara, which are all illusory, and so on and so forth. They don't have one good thing to say about ego. Not very scientific. Why? Because in science, we have creative experiences and ordinary mundane experiences. We know that mundane experiences, ego can act as an ignorant evil, sometimes evil, but most times ignorant. But when ego participates in creativity, we cannot say that ego is useless and ego is ignorant. Then we take advantage of ego's knowledge because ego does have the knowledge of memory and everything with which it gives form to ideas that we get from quantum self. So once one understands creativity and the yes, yes. No, 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 no. Mm, mm, I, I, yeah, I agree with you to some extent because Freud did say that ego is affected by the superego, and to that extent, Freud is taking into account of creativity in some sense. Okay, but that is the point that I was making. Actually, I am not disagreeing with you. I'm saying that if we use the word ego in the behavioral sense, which is the same as the esoteric sense, then we get this kind of thing. Me-centeredness is a very good way of describing it. And yes, Freud used intermediate language between creativity and, but creativity makes it very clear the ego is not just that. Ego also has a managerial aspect of being a manager of its good memory that it uses to give form to ideas. So you and I or Freud are not entirely in disagreement, okay? All right, but I will, yeah, very important point, very important point. Yes, 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 very important understanding, and let's differentiate between all three. Ego is me-centeredness and behaviorism, the center of the conditioning. It is still a head honcho, but with the conditioned software that I have created. I am the head honcho of all that, central processing unit in computer language. That's the ego, centered on me and my programs. That's the ego also of esoteric traditions. Ego in Freud, however, exists in between two states. One is the subconscious, suppressed and repressed memories. That's the id. And the other is the superego, which is the morality that has been conditioned into me by my parents, by my tradition, by my culture. And in being in between these two states, ego picks up some of both. And in picking up, it manages its affairs between all of these programs. So there are not only programs of conditioning, but also programs that other than conditioning, the repressed stuff that comes to it, also the moral stuff that comes to it from up above. So in this way, Freud's ego is different. Ego is also different in the humanistic transpersonal tradition because there, ego is creative partner of the quantum self in the creative process, which is quantum science also agrees with this. So it depends on how you define it. Indeed, Cecilia is completely correct in that. So remember this distinction, but within that distinction, it is true that ego should not be denigrated so much as the spiritual traditions do. Kill the ego. Kill the ego, the conditioned ego, after all, does include all the memory that I use to translate idea into form. It's not entirely outside of me-centeredness. So even that, I cannot really kill it. Also, another way of looking at it is in the Zen saying. Zen masters did not like this blanket statement either, so they formed a koan around it. How does the Zen master go to the bathroom? You get the import? If the ego did not exist, if the conditioned bathroom training did not exist, how does one go to the bathroom? One goes to the bathroom like a baby does. It goes everywhere. And that would not be very much of a picture of an enlightened person, would it? So in this way, the ridiculousness of the idea, give up the ego or kill the ego, is totally exposed, okay? So however we look at it, the conclusion is that the spiritual traditions, esoteric traditions are not doing a very good job in terms of how people should behave in their life. Because if you take them seriously, then what should you live? How should you live? We are born, we realize that we suffer. Indeed, there are moments of suffering, and everybody who was born has to suffer. This is one of the ultimate truths. We are born. Three ultimate truths. We are born, we suffer, we die. We can take this very seriously, three ultimate truths, but this is not entirely true though. One should immediately say that, but no, suffering is not the only experience that I have. I also expand in consciousness occasionally, so I also have happiness. So we must expand this to at least four statements. I am born, I suffer, but I am also happy sometimes, and I die. That would be more accurate statement. So, however you put it, the truth remains that the suggestions it gives, the esoteric tradition way of defining enlightenment gives people is that it is useless to hang around worldly stuff because that will only bring suffering eventually. Because the spiritual traditions immediately negates the statement that I just made, that happiness is also real, by saying that, yeah, but happiness will eventually end up in suffering only. And that is true in old age, for example, if you are not very active in your old age consists of progressive increase of suffering because sufferings dominate happiness. Body starts breaking down. With the body, mental upliftment becomes more and more difficult. Unless you exert some effort, you cannot experience exalted states anymore. So it is true that the suffering, you can think of it that way, at least, that the suffering can dominate. The not an unenlightened person could easily be overwhelmed by the suffering that old age brings. Indeed, if you remember the Buddha experience of when he came out of the palace and he went to see what the world is like, his experience first was of people who have disease, people who are beggars, and people who are sick, ill, and people who are old. And then finally mentioned he met the fourth person who is a mendicant, who has given up on the world. So his big realization that the world is suffering. But this is an exaggeration of statement, as I have said. This is an exaggeration of statement. If one is completely accepting of this statement, then see what happens, or what happens as a suggestion that you should live by. Then you should only strive to be enlightened. Only strive to be enlightened. The world is of no consequence to you, because the world will bring suffering eventually anyway, at least when you are old. It is true that after all the fun and games of the youth, everybody ends up being old and suffering dominates. So ultimately, this kind of way of looking at things is telling you that you just give up worldly affairs and prepare for enlightenment. That's the only thing that makes any sense in life. Enlightenment or death. People sometimes carry a sign in their car with their destination or bust. I've seen signs like New York or bust, like that. Enlightenment or bust. But is that the journey really? You're ignoring all this stuff that happens in the world. Is there really no meaning into it? Quantum science is firmly saying, and this is the statement of science, that it is extremely non-scientific to put things that way. You are negating something without really examining it. You are negating something on the idea that yes, something has an appearance of being an illusion. But is that appearance true either? Illusion, in our experience, what happens? Everybody been on a summer road and driving, and you see water-like appearances in the world, which you say it's a mirage. And then we look again as we get close, and we see that the mirage has disappeared because light refraction, that phenomenon, is not giving rise to the mirage anymore. This is typically what happens to illusion. All illusions disappear. But what actually has happened to the world? World, on the other hand, is not disappearing. The world, on the other hand, worldly phenomena has order in it. You repeatedly look at evolution, there is repeated order and homeostasis that is appearing. Indeed, human beings have been progressing. You can easily see progress from hunter-gatherer into the modern agricultural society. Yes, sometimes it is true that in this rational culture, we have developed habits which are pretty bad, and so there's ups and downs. We can say, yes, sometimes we are very civilized, like we were in the 70s and 80s all over the world. We enjoyed a brief 20, 30 years of enormous amount of civilization, but then we started downhill again, and now we are on a downside of that. We are indeed in the deeps, in the gutter, where many people are not experiencing that civilized exuberance anymore. We are fearful, we are anxious, we are afraid of democracy breaking down, economics breaking down, and so forth. So, okay, ups and downs. But the ups are undeniably true. You cannot neglect, you cannot say that ups do not exist. Okay? This is the point that has to be made. And therefore, the program that the spiritual traditions are suggesting is ridiculous. Paying no attention to the worldly affairs because they are all illusory or meaningless. They only lead to suffering. No, a much more healthy approach is that stay in the world and see, this is where some observation will be necessary. See if you can develop a program for yourself, or you can see that there are progressive stages towards enlightenment. Enlightenment is not a one-stage process, all or nothing, New York or bust. No, there are many intermediate destinations which are worthwhile to stop and wonder, stop and enjoy. And this is the way that things have to be looked at if you want to be scientific about it. Because science says ignore nothing until it is proven that it's ignorable. Why should we ignore? If something has something in it, then we should look at it. And indeed, life has something in it. And when we look at it, we find, okay, there is stages of happiness, there is stages of enlightenment, stages of intelligence. We can indeed climb these stages, go through these stages, and come to a place which we can call the final stage. That final stage is the stage where we go for enlightenment in the sense of achieving wholeness. So we finally get into the concept of wholeness. What is wholeness? This word has to be distinguished from oneness. They're very similar, very similar. Oneness is oneness of everything. Wholeness, what is different about it? Different about it, wholeness is it gives a connotation of working from the base components. Wholeness assumes that there are components and the components are being made into one whole. We are seeing the wholeness in all the components instead of saying the conflict of the component, like truth and lie. We can see the conflict very easily. But to see them that truth and lie can become a transcendent one whole truth, that takes a little while. But if we do that, conceptually at least we can see, it does make sense. Because eventually the lie, the opposite side of truth, does disappear when we realize that sometimes a lie is a useful lie. Lies are not necessarily a bad thing. Initially we create this good-bad connotation of the opposites. And when we look at the opposites in earnest, we find that no, opposites do not have to be necessarily good, bad, that kind of connotation at all. Lying can be necessary and good sometimes. And then we begin to transcend this distinction of good truth and find the transcendent truth. Could you turn off the microphone? Okay. So this way of looking at wholeness. Wholeness is looking at the duality with which we also ordinarily look at things and then integrating it. This also is the meaning of the word yoga. Yoga can be thought of as union. Yoga can also be thought of as integration. It's the integration meaning two opposites have been integrated. This is the way that wholeness is achieved. Another way of thinking of all this is the oneness is before choice and collapse. Consciousness is one without a second. That's the oneness. After collapse, what has happened? Consciousness is a wholeness. No longer we need to think of it as a oneness, but still that oneness exists. Oneness with everything does exist, but it's a wholeness of the self with everything else. Self and everything are separate, but yet they are one whole. They're not separate in the usual sense of it. That separateness will take the dependent co-arising, and the ego has to come and to produce that kind of separateness, where we really are separate. I am centered on me, and the objects are the other. This kind of separateness does not exist in the quantum self-experience. But yes, I am the other, but I'm also one with the other. So wholeness is this state of existence, where me and the other make one whole thing. We are not really conflictual. The other is not in conflict with me. The other is whole with me. Okay? That is the meaning of I'm one with everything. So that is the wholeness that we are talking about, achieving wholeness. And then quantum spirituality can be simply be stated that we are changing the spiritual pursuit. Instead of spiritual pursuit of oneness, we are making into spiritual pursuit of wholeness. The advantage is huge. We keep attention to the world all the time. The advantage is huge because we don't make it one journey where destination is everything. the journey doesn't matter. We are saying that no, journey does matter. There are stages in the journey which are delightful. And as we make the journey, there are many ways of making the journey. And all the journeys that we make in fullness in mind can be very delightful. Okay? Make sense so far? So then the next question is, what kind of journeys do we do? What kind of journeys do we talk about? And then going into the nitty-gritty. So one of the things that we need to do is to get an idea of this wholeness first. So let's do a meditation which will give you a sense of this wholeness. In an experience, we already have talked about in the quantum brain, the idea of the P-conscious. We have the quantum cells, then we have the ego, and in between we have the P-conscious. You probably have seen Venn diagrams, right? Venn, S-V-E-N, Venn diagram. If you draw a circle, you have to follow my fingers. You draw a circle, you draw another circle, but it has overlap with the other circle. That's the Venn diagram. In the middle of the two circles, one like this, and in the middle, there is this shape of a interface between the two circles. Venn diagram. So you can think of the ego, the quantum self, and the preconscious in terms of the Venn diagram. Ego is one circle, quantum self is the other circle, but the two are having an overlap. And this overlap is the preconscious. Okay. Where both ego and quantum self can exist. Okay. And in practice, of course, they cannot exist simultaneously because obviously state of consciousness is state of consciousness. One cannot be in two states of consciousness at once. So ego or quantum self, ego or quantum self, ego or quantum self. So in that junction, preconscious, ego or quantum self. Mostly ego initially, little quantum self, and as we proceed towards the quantum self circle, we find mostly quantum self, little ego at some point. So this is the way of looking at that one. So, and then in any experience, it is like this. So often, if we are just be, if we are in the state of just be, for example, just in the waiting meditation, just being, just sitting, in those kinds of meditation, we get into a state where many thoughts are occurring. One thought is giving way to another, to another, to another. It also is a familiar experience to a new mother who has work to do, household work, but there is always the baby who might cry any moment. So part of the mind is occupied with the baby, part of the mind is occupied with the husband, part of the mind is occupied with this and that and the work at hand. Multitasking, we sometimes call it. So in both waiting experience and the multitasking experience, there is many overlapping Venn diagrams going on. And you can make out that there is still the quantum self, there is still the ego experience, secondary experiences of each of the ego experiences. This is what makes up the Venn diagram. So if we simulate this in our consciousness by closing our eyes, this is the meditation. So please take a comfortable seat. Take a deep breath. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze your body and let go. Take another deep breath. Squeeze, 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 and let go. Relax. You are into thinking about something. That can be anything. Just let it be. Another thought is replacing it. Let it be. and watch yourself that when you let it be, where are you? You are somewhere in between, like in that Venn diagram. Again, another thought comes and you let it be. You don't make any effort of pushing these thoughts away. It's not like ordinary meditation. This is where it differs. You're not throwing anything away. You are not putting anything away. You are not trying to keep, you're not saying that, no, 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 I don't want to attach to you. Here we are not making any demand on attaching. Yes, if attachment happens, it can happen, that's okay. More like multitasking. I am attached to each of the tasks because each of the tasks is waits for me something to be done. I'm cooking and I'm also changing diapers. I'm also washing. I'm also um, thinking. And so all this stuff that I'm doing, all connected with each other. To get into that kind of state by not rejecting any thought and not being not attached or anything like that to any thought. Attachment is okay. Be persistent in this state. Be persistent. And now pay attention to the quantum self. Where is quantum self in all this? Every junction between two Venn circles will have quantum self in it. If we center towards this quantum self, where would that center be? That center be in the gap between all these thoughts. All these thoughts and their reverberations, they would form almost a continuum, except there would be also gaps between them. In those gaps, we have to find the quantum self. Meditate on the gaps between thoughts. Let's do this for 5 minutes. Okay, very slowly open your eyes. So meditate on the gap between thoughts. There's a beautiful story about this. The Buddha had a disciple named Subhuti. Microphone. Buddha had a disciple called Subhuti. This Subhuti is meditating one day, deep in meditation. All of a sudden, flowers started showering over him. Subhuti is very surprised, and some voices were responding to his surprise. We are praising you for your emptiness, discourse on emptiness. Subhuti says, but I have not given a discourse. I haven't spoken. And the voices told him again, you have not spoken and we have not heard. This is true emptiness. This is a beautiful story. Why? Because as you think, as you identify with the thought becomes a sort of mind speak. You have noticed that, right? So this mind speak, and in between there are these gaps. That's what the emptiness is. So if we really do this meditation, once in a while, we'll just fall into this gap. And this is what actually produces the relaxation that we talk about in this kind of just sitting meditation. Just sitting meditation in this form, meditation on emptiness, is also a very, very relaxing kind of meditation that you can think of. You have not spoken and we have not heard. Beautiful way of summarizing it. Okay, so you get some idea of what we are looking for. Now, of course, in a meditation, this is just a transitory state, and we don't expect to get anything other than a temporary elation from it. You will get a temporary burst of happiness from this if you can identify with this emptiness. So this is a very, very useful way of looking at meditation, looking for emptiness. Okay. Our next topic that we have, this is a major topic. So let's see how far we can go with this topic. And then next time we will finish up. So the next topic is, there are really three topics. Next topic is the paths, various paths towards quantum enlightenment, realization of happiness. Of course, people talk about various paths also in connection with the conventional enlightenment that I talked about before. But there are the various paths does not mean to be as elaborate as paths. They are really just naming of the path in terms of what the person is doing, rather than so the spiritual paths, whenever people are talking about paths, they are not really seriously talking about paths to the traditional enlightenment. Whenever you are talking about paths, you're talking about various things in the past, and therefore you are detailing out the paths like, with our intermediate stations and all that. And so it does not make much sense of talking about paths to the traditional spiritual enlightenment. The paths indeed are given in books like Bhagavad Gita or Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which are not books of traditional enlightenment. They are books more of the quantum enlightenment kind of thing that we are talking about. So there is a lot of confusion about that too in the literature. Paths. Bhagavad Gita, some of you may have read it or being curious about it. You should at least pick up a book and look at it. It's very interesting reading. Once you start reading it, you will have no difficulty finishing it. So it gives us three paths. It casually mentions the fourth path that Patanjali elaborated. And these paths are well known, so we'll mention it very quickly. So Raja Yoga, this one is the one that is expressed very, very beautifully, exposed very beautifully in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. That's the path of meditation, basically. And then we have Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga. First 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita about Karma Yoga. Second 6 chapters are about Bhakti Yoga. Third 6 chapters are about Jnana Yoga. Oh, so that's one way of looking at these yogas. Another way of looking at these yogas are more in practical terms. Like when you take a profession, you train yourself as a profession, and then you take a professional job or you professional business, you set up your profession. Now these professions, of course, may mean nothing. Today, you just do a profession according to your training, and you may not think anything of it. But as I have said many times before in many courses, but let me remind you again that the professions are very much connected with archetypes. And again, businessman pursues the archetype of abundance. The politician and the military people, they pursue the archetype of power. The artists in general, novelists, poets, musicians, they all are into the archetype of beauty. The people of clergy, people of social work, they are in the archetype of goodness. Everybody is in the archetype of love. And then the scientists are, media people are, they are all aficionados of the archetype of truth. That's what they investigate, what the truth is, what the fact is. And then we have the legal people who are involved with the archetype of justice. And finally, of course, some people who are into wholeness, but specifically wholeness has a very low-level activity as well, which is this subject of healing. Healers are naturally pursuing wholeness, but at a level which is important also for survival. So there's a survival level aspect of wholeness. So wholeness is from the beginning, survival level, as well as in the higher level. The content changes, but the pursuit is the pursuit of wholeness. And then simply one can just live and find wholeness in that by proceeding with the subject of nutrition. How do I provide nutrition to all my 5 bodies? That, it turns out, is also a pursuit of wholeness. So we can speak in this kind of way as well. Okay. So when we talk about the professions, how is that different from Karma Yoga? This is an interesting question. Professions we do without the archetypes in mind, that's trivial. Professions we do with the archetypal purpose in mind, then what we are doing, we are exploring that archetype. For example, suppose I have a profession of a business person. Then I am looking at the archetype of abundance. So do I go on making money and that's abundance? No. If I'm looking for abundance, very soon I realize that abundance is a state of mind, state of consciousness. I achieve it when I'm satisfied. So long as I'm not satisfied, I have obviously not even close to achieving any closure to my pursuit of abundance. So I become cautious. I realize, okay, so what will I have to do? And then very soon I realize that I cannot just pursue abundance as an archetype in the form of wealth. That will not give it to me. There is a mental side of it where I have to cultivate how to feel satisfied, how to bring satisfaction. And then the pursuit becomes somewhat different. Pursuit becomes a movement from accomplishment to accomplishment, and the partial satisfaction that every accomplishment brings. So that's the second stage of the pursuit of abundance. Before you just pursue without any look at what you are doing. You're just pursuing making money, making money, making money, making money. But then you realize that this is not giving me any satisfaction at all. So how to bring satisfaction? Then you become concentrated on, okay, I make a deal here, a deal there. Every time a deal is completed, I'm satisfied. That gives them. It is still, I'm still no end of deals. I just make deals and make deals and deals. I feel momentary satisfaction, but then I am back at searching again. I want more money, more money, more money. Still that continues, more deals, more deals, more deals. Why does it end? And that's when you become clear that if we pursue abundance alone, it will never give me a closure in terms of satisfaction. For that, I have to be also exploring the archetype of goodness or archetype of love. And immediately the idea comes to me that archetype of goodness and love is about another person, a relationship. And in that relationship, if we pursue love or goodness, we immediately go beyond ourselves. We enlarge ourselves. We expand ourselves. We feel the expansion of consciousness. We learn to care for another person. And in that caring, we discover a very funny thing that I do not want to be rich only for myself. I also want to be rich for my loved one or for the one that I'm good to. I also want to be rich for my friend. I want to share my wealth with my friend. In that sharing, now I find, okay, so I have achieved satisfaction in the sense I must be satisfied with what I have because I can share it. Whatever I have, I can share it now. And that sharing has come the idea of fulfillment of that particular archetype. I have now embodied abundance in myself because I can share it. So abundance is a very interesting archetype in the sense that you don't fully achieve it until you learn to share it, until you combine it with goodness or love, where you can share your uh, abundance. And virtually the same thing with the archetype of power. Archetype of power is a very special one because archetype of power has been the purpose of has been the purport of the hero's journey that was mythologized, that is also in our collective unconscious. Carl Jung and mythologist Joseph Campbell have written plenty about hero's journey, and you also have some exposure already, some of you, but it is worth remembering once again. So the hero starts like every person does, innocent of everything, but that's only a beginning. And then we find out about the world and we are a little bit worried. What is the meaning? What is the purpose? We are asking this kind of question. So we go through that phase. And then in the third phase, we say, okay, let's face it. Let's investigate. Let's investigate what is the meaning and what is the purpose. And in that investigation, we become the hero. Journey begins, in other words. And then the journey goes through the phases of I have to be rebel phase. And then the phase is the phase of the explorer. I have to explore. At that point, we discover the creative process and all that. And after that, I become a creator. So that's the journey. As a creator, what do I create? What do I find and what do I create for myself? I create with three archetypal images in mind. One is the image of power. That's the power in itself, by itself. Is typically in Jungian terminology, it's the image of the king, image of the powerful person sitting on a throne with a crown on his head as this accomplishment that he has. But of course, it does not bring satisfaction, just like abundance. It does not bring satisfaction. Power for power's sake, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and it never brings any satisfaction to the powerful person. But then you learn to combine it with goodness. In that process, there is another image of the caregiver. You start caring for others. And third image is the image of the lover. You bring in love. So again, the same idea, love and goodness come together with power. And those are the three we will explore and embody. As you embody just the archetype of power, you may exit. That exit gives you another image. That image is the image of the psychic. You become the psychic accomplisher. You are still an accomplisher. We are accomplishing slightly different thing. Before you were about accomplishing just power. Now you are accomplishing power with something to show for. You are showing them, look, I have psychic power. So you have accomplished something. In the second stage, you have gone a little bit better. You have had the experience of love and goodness along with power, love or goodness or power and goodness or power and love, and you have accomplished a little more because you have had the aha experience. You have realized, this is what the meaning and purpose is. It really is. Power alone can never leads to power that I can share with others. Power has to be explored with the archetype of love and or goodness. Okay, so fine, but you don't really change yourself. You don't go through the implementation stage of the creative process. So these people end up as what one calls the gestor. You laugh at the world because you realize the world is full of people who are looking for power, but they are insatiable and they never get there. And the only way to get it is to combine with love and goodness, but these people don't know it. So you laugh at it. You laugh at the frailty of what people are doing. Or you become a trickster. You trick people into, okay, look, realize that there really is a way you can combine with love and goodness and accomplish something that is better than where you are. So in a sense, you become a teacher kind of thing, but a teacher who does not practice it himself or herself, a teacher who is not doing that manifestation stage of the process of creativity. And then, of course, the final stage of the hero's journey is the place where you complete the manifestation stage and you come out as the knower of power with the archetype of goodness and or love. And that's the stage of a sage. A sage is one who is satisfied with power, satisfied with abundance that he has, and that is a completion in a sense. Is it wholeness? It's partial wholeness, yes. It is the part of the journey to wholeness. And then one has to just take up the conflicts. There are still conflicts remaining, and those conflicts will have to be addressed in their own form. And you can address them as a professional, as a karma yogi. You can address them in various ways that I already have mentioned. Gada Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga. You can address them in terms of the journey of the avatar. Let me talk about the journey of the avatar a little bit. The avatar, this concept is, we call it the quantum leader in the book, Quantum Spiritual Creativity. By the way, we published the book. You have seen it. I think many of you should have it. This is the textbook of this course, Quantum Spirituality. In this book, we call it the quantum leader, but traditionally it's also called the avatar or avatara. Sanskrit is avatara, and Hindi is its avatar. Hindi word has been taken over in English, so avatar is now also a word in English. The meaning is not necessarily the same that I am giving. Meaning is very distorted because the movie was made by the name and so on and so forth. Anyway, so what does the avatara does that is different? Avatara realizes that the whole process, avatara realizes that basic situation is this. One has to first start with meaning and purpose. Then one has to start accomplishing meaning and purpose. And in the process, realize that the main obstructions is the negative emotion. Well, there is me-centeredness and negative emotion together. And both of these can be handled by developing positive emotion. So the first stage is just develop positive emotion um, and try to balance the negative emotions. When you succeed in that, that completes the very first stage. At the second stage is the archetype that I have to integrate and discover. The hero already has done that, so this part is very similar to hero's journey. We investigate an archetype, but look at the uh, the journey here is only slightly different because to develop positive emotions, I have already studied the archetype of goodness and or love. Those are the sources of positive emotion that I need, which will balance most of the negative. So I have already done this archetypal part to some extent, except that I have not necessarily taken quantum leap. I just have made circuits. So the difference between the first stage and the second stage that I'm talking about is just the journey has changed. It's no longer just making the circuit so that I can balance something that exists in me that presents a barrier, but also quantum leaping in the process. Now, positive emotion can be achieved with quantum leap as well. And it is encouraged to have quantum leaps, and that what define the stations of intelligence or stations of happiness that I have talked about. But in general, you can mix it all up and don't have to think of this in terms of separate stations necessarily. In other words, you can start with either love or goodness and then proceed with these explorations, and then somewhere in the process add power and or abundance with it, and then proceed with this. And whatever the quantum leap happens, then at once you accomplish this next stage of the process of wholeness, where you have a direct idea of what an archetypal exploration and embodiment means to you. And if the exploration is both of power and or goodness and love, then you have finished the hero's journey in the traditional sense. If you have done abundance, that's very similar to the hero's journey in the traditional sense. If it is another archetype, then you have gone beyond the hero's journey and you have started the journey of the avatar. So journey of the avatar then goes over the all the archetypes one by one. The archetype of the head, archetype of truth, archetype of justice, and then finally comes to the archetype of, well, somewhat there is also the archetype of beauty. The archetype of beauty is the part of both archetype of the heart as well as the archetype of head. And so you just get into these archetypes, and the process, you learn to do every archetype within achieving wholeness. In other words, every archetype comes in dichotomies, and while achieving the embodiment of an archetype, I can always look at it as an integration of that archetypal dichotomy. In addition, the Avatara also accomplishes the integration of the three fundamental dichotomies that we are born with, that Jesus talks about, Jesus Yoga, I've talked about it many times, the male-female difference, male-female dichotomy, the inner-outer dichotomy, and finally the transcendent immanent dichotomy. All three dichotomies are integrated by the wholeness seeker. So that is precisely the investigation of wholeness. In the process, you may also look at your nutrition. You may also look at yourself as a healer. That's one path, the healing path. But basically, the whole thing consists of just this process of starting to develop positive emotions. That I think is the best way to begin the process instead of beginning with power or abundance. And after you have done a little bit of that, then add power and abundance, and then finish the hero's journey, so to speak. And after the hero's journey is finished, you're already in a very good space. And then talk about finishing the archetypes one by one and the archetypal dichotomies, integrating all of that, and finally come to the three fundamental dichotomies and integrate all of them. This is the journey of the achievement of wholeness, enlightenment in the quantum style. Okay? All right. I have spoken for a long time. Let's do a little meditation. Can we do the investigation of the archetype of wholeness in the same style as we are prescribing for the traditional enlightenment, namely enlightenment or bust, without going through the intermediate processes that I just described in some detail? Does it make sense? Yes, it does make sense. So this is part of an exercise that you already have been doing. All of you have been told many times to do the intention exercise, make it part of your daily life. So this is a particular example of the intention exercise. What you do here is simply making the intention, but the intention here is quantum enlightenment. Okay? Clear? So let's get ourselves enthusiastic. Inspiration. So bring some inspiration in your, if you're not already inspired, all this talk of enlightenment, it should be inspirational. After all, we are talking about wholeness. No conflict. We should be inspired to directly achieve wholeness, state of no conflict. Only joy of wholeness. If you are sufficiently inspired, then make an intention. I want to explore and embody wholeness. I know about sharing. I want to explore and embody wholeness. And share with everyone in my life. I want to explore and embody wholeness so I can share it with everyone in my life. Make it strong. I want to explore and embody wholeness so that everyone in my life also can embody wholeness. I want this intention to be in consonance with the movement of consciousness. I want this intention of achieving wholeness, embodying wholeness in consonance with the purposive movement of consciousness. I want to achieve, to embody archetype of wholeness. I want this intention to be in consonance with the purposive movement of consciousness. Go on, emphasizing this for a bit and remain in silence for the rest of the meditation. We'll meditate for 5 minutes. Okay, very slowly open your eyes. And now we are ready for questions and comments. Please. Okay. Well, the archetype of power and abundance, they can be talked as of an inferior archetype and the rest of them as superior archetype. Because in it, yeah, in it, yeah, they are all archetypes are supramental. But the archetypes of abundance and power also serve mainly our survival need. So I wouldn't use the word inferior necessarily, but I can see why he may use the word. I, I wouldn't use the word inferior. No archetype is inferior because they're all coming from the divinity, all coming from that oneness. Yeah, you were right in your intuition there, and he probably means something else. But what I'm also saying that even if he doesn't mean something else, even then, in some sense, because the archetypes of abundance and power, if they are pursued by themselves, they don't lead to satisfaction. You can think of them as inferior archetypes. They're not transpersonal by themselves. They become transpersonal only when explored in conjunction with love and or goodness. Yeah, it's a peculiar word to use because there is no inferiority and superiority. That's true. Your initial revulsion is correct. Okay, next question, please. Questions, comments, meditations, whatever you
Amit,
like to call.
I have
Yes.
a comment, Amit. You spoke at the beginning of your presentation today about the oneness, and it's very difficult to research it. And I just came across a research by a very young researcher, Ruben Laukkonen. I will write it into the chat. And he actually managed to do in the lab some kind of research about what's happening in the brain when consciousness ceases. This is the expression he caused it. But he works with very advanced meditators who are able to go into this totally no object subject split state for days without having any biological needs. And it's just really fascinating what they are finding about the impact of this state on the brain, because there is a kind of a reboot. The brain kind of renews itself due to this state. So I will send you if you want the name and the link because it's quite fresh for me. So I'm not able to give you more information, but I found it very, very intriguing.
That sounds excellent. If there is any neuroscientific evidence of this kind of people and their state, that would be lovely. There is a little bit in terms of brainwaves that I already know, because now we know that the brainwaves don't end with the delta waves, 1 to 3 hertz, but there are brainwaves even less than 1 hertz. They are sometimes called epsilon waves. So, and that could be a signature of these very deep states of uh, samadhi with no separateness. But if you have additional data, that would be lovely. Yeah, send me to Lida immediately as soon as you can. You are
I
driving, I
will.
can, but
I will send you by email today because now I'm in the
good.
car, but I will do that in the evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Hi,
Any
Amit.
other?
Hi, Amit.
Yes.
Question, a stupid one at that. There are two parts to the transcendental enlightened state of Buddha, if we were to take as a great example. One is his enlightenment, the other is his usefulness to others. Now,
Yeah.
his transcendental state can be contested by a drug addict saying, "I can get to that state by psychosomatic substance," and achieve the same level of nirval vikalpa state. And the purpose of us doing this or that can never be just an enlightened state of silence or ecstasy, but it is of giving. The enlightened state means nothing to others. It is one of giving. The giving is the purpose and meaning. Is that the way we should read things? Is that the way we should see our reincarnation? Is that the way we should see our conscious progression to the next stage, as stated by Aurobindo? What is the real meaning of our being? The suffering, happiness, all inclusive. It cannot be the enlightened state alone. It's useless to anybody except for
Then
that individual.
what are you saying? You're saying the enlightened state is useless to anybody else.
Yes,
Only to you it is
yes,
useful.
yes.
No, this is not right, Sandila. Abandon that thought. Because what happens to such a person is their proximity changes. The effect of their proximity on the surrounding people is astounding. I have experienced such people myself. And indeed, in their presence, you become happy. There's a induction characteristic of these people. This is a very strange effect. I cannot tell you my surprise when I first experienced it in the house of in the ashram of a American enlightened person named Franklin Merrill Wolf. I was in his ashram at a period of my life when I was kind of unhappy with the research not going anywhere, unhappy with some difficulties that I was having with my marital situation. Overall, very unhappy. So I got somehow invited to his ashram to give a lecture, and that ended up to 1 month stay. And after the first week, I kept hearing about this delightful quantum physicist who has come to the ashram to give, he's a wonderful man to be with and all that. And I couldn't figure it out because I didn't see anybody. So one morning, people were having breakfast, and I entered, and immediately people fell silent, and I became a little angry. I said, I know that this guy is around, and you have all talking about this delightful quantum physicist. I would like to meet him. I would like to talk with him. It would be nice to talk with somebody about quantum physics. And everybody started laughing. And then I realized they're actually talking about me. But how did we become from that angry young man looking for answers and not finding any, unsatisfied with himself, unsatisfied with his marriage, unsatisfied with the research, all of a sudden finding myself as this happy physicist who is making everybody else happy and so forth? How did that happen? And then gradually the explanation dawned on me that these people that I was with, this person, has that inducive property, like a magnet can induce magnetism in an iron nail. Similarly, I, being a nail, have become of that enlightened state for momentarily during my stay at that ashram. It was an amazing experience, I tell you. So don't doubt it. They have, when you become enlightened, you develop a fragrance about yourself. And that fragrance is inescapable. In the proximity, people will feel the change. And of course, if you have empathy, people already can feel something that you have. But this is an excess in more than just empathy. This is a fantastic, nothing more evocative than the word fragrance. They develop a fragrance, and it is for everybody to pick up. They have nothing else to seek for. They are done. But there's a fragrance about them that makes them very useful to be around us, because they give us faith, which is what we are looking for. Because the journey is very arduous one. It is a difficult journey going over many lifetimes. We need to be inspired. And having this experience of this fragrance is really very inspiring. Okay.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you.
Next question, please. Comments, questions. No, do not think that way. Let me interrupt. No, never think you're far away. Never think that way. You are as close as a needle that separates you. Nothing more, nothing less. Really, any time enlightenment can happen. Think of it always that way. That's the ultimately the very important part is the faith that what I'm doing is in consonance with the movement of consciousness. This is why this exercise that we did together, the intention exercise, intention towards achieving wholeness. The more you align your intention exercise towards achieving wholeness, the better it is. Why wait? Because wholeness is our birthright. Everybody will eventually achieve it anyway. So why wait? Why not now? If everybody will achieve it, then why not now? It's inevitable, and therefore, why not now? Because if now, then you can serve many incarnations in the service of the world. And that's what the world needs. Today, the world sadly lacks in avatars. And we have to bring more avatars. And, my ardent hope is that some of us, right in this company, have that strength, the power, the abundance, the goodness, the truth to bring that wholeness in the world. Right? Yes, it does. It does. Yes, it does. Anytime you talk about this, it becomes a satsang. You are yourself providing others with a satsang. Anytime you talk about truth and trivial stuff with others, it's a satsang. Never forget that, and always bring that. Today we have, the materialist science have gotten us so far into, we ourselves don't do what we should be doing. We ourselves don't talk about very much about these things that we are talking about here. We separate sacred and mundane. Instead, in the middle of mundane conversation, bring up these confusions. What is wholeness? What is enlightenment? What is meaning and purpose? What is it? What is this activity that I'm doing now? Where does that belong in the scale of meaning and purpose? Is it meaningful? Is it purposeful? Bring that questions in every occasion, in everything that you are doing. How can I make it purposeful? If I'm doing something which it seems to be trivial, how can I make it purposeful? If I'm watching a basketball game, how can I make it purposeful? These are the questions that bring us closer and closer to enlightenment. No? Next question, please. No? Shall I end the discourse already? 5 minutes still to go. Well, looks like everybody is satisfied. All right, thank you everyone. You are still not following my suggestion. My suggestion is you come prepared with at least one question. that you can throw in if you get into a situation where so much time is left and nobody is asking a question, then you can always ask one of your prepared question. Of course, questions are best if they're spontaneous and in response to the discourse, but there is no harm done in asking a question anyway, because time is otherwise is being wasted. But anyway.
I do have a question, Amit. I just need sometimes a couple of minutes to think, but you talked today about numinous experiences. What's the difference between them and the supramental experience?
What kind of experience?
Numinous. I think it's coming from Kant. Numinous.
Oh, numinous experience.
Yes, yes.
Numinous experience is any spiritual experience. Any spiritual experience of expansion of consciousness can be thought of as a numinous experience. Sometimes people identify noumenon as opposed to phenomenon. Phenomenon are about phenomena as they occur in experiences or in objective situations. They're just phenomena or facts. Whereas noumena are those occasions where something more, something of the sacred, something of the oneness that comes through in whichever is taking place. Okay? Yeah.
So is that a synonym to supramental, or are there some differences?
Supramental is always numinous.
Okay.
But numinous can also refer to not just supramental, it can refer to any moment of spirituality, even without going to the supramental. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Anything of meaning that that can give you a feeling of I'm just not this, I'm more than this. That's noumena. But the sacred is involved, but not necessarily specifically the supramental. Okay?
Thank you, Amit.
Almost the same thing, though. I mean, I say that with some reservation because it's almost the same thing. And people have numinous experience without any knowledge of the archetypes. This is the reason that numinous experience are maybe a little bit different connotation. Any spiritual experience is a numinous experience. Okay, thank you, Rita. All right, so we end here, and thank you, and I'll see you next week again on the same subject, quantum spirituality.
Thank you very much, Amit, and bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Amit.
Bye.